Now let's look at the model for Backbone.js. To do this, we'll be doing some interactive work with our browser and the JavaScript console. So to do this, you'll make sure that you download the handouts.zip file, and you'll want to open up 00-index.html, where you'll see a list of all the code examples we'll be working with for the course. And you'll want to open your web inspector, which will give us our JavaScript console so we can interact with the code that way. I'm going to jump over to my browser, and if you open up your index, you'll see all of our different files listed here. And the easiest way to open the web inspector is just to right click on the screen here and do inspect element. And once you do that, that brings up our web inspector, and the last tab on the end is the console. And if you click on that, we now have a prompt where we can actually type in JavaScript commands and interact with our JavaScript. Now, you'll notice that when I click on model 01 here, we get a white screen, and that's on purpose because we haven't implemented any views. We're going to start with our model, which is our data, and so there isn't any visual element to that, but we still want to see what sort of data is being stored in our model, and so we'll use this JavaScript console down here to actually interact with that data. Now I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint here and take a look at the code here. And I want to start off by pointing out that I've wrapped my Backbone model inside of an immediately invoking function expression. But you'll notice one thing: I'm not putting the var keyword in front of my Backbone model or in front of my instance of my Backbone model. Now, if you were writing a real application, you'd want to include that var keyword in there, but because we want this to be available from the JavaScript console, I'm making these global variables so that I can access them. But I just wanted to point out that that's not the way you'd want to write your real application, but for this course, I wanted to make it easy for us to interact with our model example here using the console. So with that, let's take a look. We've created a new Backbone model called wine. And we haven't assigned any additional properties or attributes to this model. We've made it as simple as possible. And when I create an instance of my wine model, I'm giving it a name attribute and assigning it a value. And that's all I'm doing. So if I go back to my browser, I can actually type in first wine, and if I hit enter, I'm going to get back this this function back with all of these different attributes and different methods that I can call. But that's not really what I want to see. I actually want to see the data that's inside of my first wine instance here. So to do that, I'll type in first wine.toJSON, and if I hit enter, that actually returns the model object here, this first wine object. And if I look inside there, I can see that I actually have a name. So toJSON is a helper method that is part of the Backbone model, and I can call toJSON to get my entire object. I can also type in firstWine.get and then pass in what attribute I want to get back from my model. So these are implicit getters and setters that are part of Backbone.js models. So when I say get name, it tells me that it's Claude Pegas. I can also do firstWine.set, and if I set a name argument here, I can say Robert Mondavi, and if I hit enter, I've now set my new name attribute. And if you use your up and down arrows, you can actually pull up a previous command here that was entered into the console. So I'm going to do get name here, and it passes back Robert Mondavi because that's the new value that's been set for this model. So that completes our Model 1 example. I'm going to go back to our list here, and I'll go look at our slide deck here. So we've defined our model. Now let's take the next step here, and let's look at a few options that you can set. If you want to see all the methods and attributes that you can assign on your models, you can definitely take a look at the Backbone documentation. Now I'm just going to assign a default here, so I want to put in a default name so that when I create a new instance of my wine model it has a name. And I also want to add a method called updateName that when you pass in an argument it will then set the name of this instance to whatever name is passed in there. So I'm doing first wine, and I set it equal to a new wine instance, and I'm not passing in any names, so it's going to give me my default, and then I'm going to send that out to the console log so I can see it. I'll click on Model 2 here, and in my console you'll see it's output an object that says the name is now $2. Now I want to go ahead and I want to update that, but I want to use my new method that I added. So I'll say update name, and I'll say Charles Shaw is going to be the new name. And now the name has been updated, and I'll go ahead and get the first wine object, and it tells me that the new name is now Charles Shaw. So there you've just seen we can have defaults, and we can also have methods actually part of our model. Let's go to Model 3 example here. And in Model 3, we're going to add a listener on our model. We're going to say whenever the name changes on this instance of this model, I then want to alert people that the name has changed here. So this is adding a listener for an event, and the event is the change event, and I can specify the change in the actual name property is what I'm listening for. So let's go over to Model 3. I'll go to Model 3. If I click on that, it tells me my object's been created, and it's $2 Chuck. And now I'm going to go in and I'm going to update it to Charles Shaw. And when I do that, it actually gives me it actually outputs a message saying that I've updated my name. And if I output to JSON, I can see that yes, in fact, I've updated the name. Now I'm going to go into my editor here, and I'm going to actually modify this code here, and I'm going to actually say when the name changes, I want you to output to the log the actual name for this instance. So I'll save that. I'll go back and do a refresh. And now I'll update it. And not only does it say it's updated, but it actually tells me what I've updated the name to. So as you can see, models is all about your objects, and it's about creating instances of your objects and then interacting with them in some way. And sometimes that can trigger events. Sometimes you can listen to changes on your models, and the same will be true when we start to look at collections in the next section.